नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। अनन्तसंसारसमुद्रतार नौकायिताभ्यां गुरुभक्तिदाभ्यां वैराग्य साम्राज्यदपूजनाभ्यां नमो नमः श्री गुरुपादुकाभ्याम्। अञ्जनानन्दनं वीरं जानकी शोकनाशनं कपीशमक्षहन्तारं वन्दे लङ्का भयङ्करम्। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। यदङ्घ्रिपङ्केरुगरेणुलग्नं निपीयनीरं विमलन्तरङ्गः जानामि तत्त्वं निजमात्मरूपं। जानामि तत्त्वं निजमात्मरूपं। तं नौमि नारायणतीर्थमार्यं। तं नौमि नारायणतीर्थमार्यम्। Namaskaram all of you, and welcome to the 50th session of Krishna Leela Tarangini. As you may recall, we saw in the last session more benedictions from gopis and how Tirtha used those as subtle opportunities for injecting Vedantic interpretations. The concluding Geetam of the 6th Tarangam is the third in the line of benedictions, but it is also packed with a lot of Vedanta. In the Geetam 56, Karunaya Avalokayamam Sri Narasimha, Narasimha of Sobhanadri Hill was praised. As many of you may be aware, Sobhanadri is about 40 miles from Vijayawada, the major town. In the Geetam 58, Vada Kim Karavani Saki He Vada, Tirtha gives a preamble of what to come as explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, Dasamaskandam, chapter 31, sloka 15 in Rasa Leela, during which the gopis tell Krishna, Atati yad bhavan anni kananam truti yugayate tvam apashyatam. Not seeing you even for a nanosecond becomes the pain of separation for a millennium. In the next Geetam 59, which we will hear now, the gopis describe him as the honey in the lotuses made of collection of all the Vedas. And in fact, this Geetam number 59 is so pregnant with Vedanta and so many phrases have been used which will be explaining so many Upanishads. This particular Geetam has profound Vedantic significance, which we will see after the song. Madhye Krishnam Marakadamanichayam Madhye Krishnam मध्ये कृष्ण मरगत मणिचायम इच्छा विहारं कृत्वा गोप्या कुवलय दृशो नायको वेट्टयन्त्यः गायन्त्यस्तं सरसवचसा दास्य भावम् गायन्त्यस्तं सरसवचसा दास्य भावम् भजन्त्यो बृन्दारण्ये मणय इव ताः पद्मरागा इवासन् निगम वृन्दसरोरुग निगम वृन्दसरोरुग निगम वृन्दसरोरुग निगम वृन्दसरोरुग संग निखिल लोक मधुस्व सुखात्मकं मधुरीपं प्रतिलभ्य च वल्लवी मधुकरा सुकरा जगुरित्यलं मधुरीपं प्रतिलभ्य च वल्लवी मधुकरा सुकरा जगुरित्यलम् वनभुवि गोविन्दम् इह विहरन्तं वनभुवि गोविन्दम् इह विहरन्तं वनभुवि गोविन्दम् इह विहरन्तं वल्लभ युवती जनबाष्पं वनभुवि गोविन्दम् इह विहरन्तं वल्लभ युवती जनबाष्पं वनभुवि गोविन्दम् निगम सरोरुग नित्य संगतमधुं निगम सरोरुग नित्य संगतमधुं मधुकरात्मतये समुदितं कृष्णं मधुकरात्यतये समुदितं कृष्णम् अगणित गोदनम् अपरिमितानन्दम् अगणित गोदनम् अपरिमितानन्दम् आनन्दकरम् अमरेशितुमर्पितो वनभुवि गोविन्दम् इह विहरन्तं वनभुवि गोविन्दम् इह विहरन्तम् इन शशि पावक तारक भासकम् ईक्षण समुदित जगदेकनादम् मुनिजन मनस सारसवरहंसम् महनीय दैवतम् अखिल देहो वनभुवि गोविन्दम् विहरन्तं वल्लभ युवती जनपद्मनो वनभुवि गोविन्दम् गोविन्दम् लावण्य सरिदेक नायकम् अखिल संरक्षणम् अमर संरक्षणम् अधुना सेवक शिवनारायण तीर्थ भावितम् श्रेयो विनायकम् इह वेद वीरिणा वनभुवि गोविन्दम् इह विहरन्तम् Vallava Yuvati Janapatpurno Vanabhuvi Govinda Govinda. We just now heard Slokam 151 and 152 explaining how the gopis, with their eyes resembling the petals of the blue water lily, surrounded Bhagavan Krishna, and how Krishna looked actually embedded amidst all of them. The Gita is packed with the terms indicating serious Vedanta from Brihadaranyaka, Katha, Mundaka, Chandogya, Taittiriya, and Aitiriya Upanishads. In fact, if we look at the very first stanza, Nigama Saroruga Nitya Sangata Madhum, that is the very first Vedantic statement. Tirtha calls Sri Krishna Paramatman the Madhu or honey eternally found in the eternal tree of Vedas. Nitya Sangata Madhum Nigama Saroruga. All the things in the world are created for being useful to one another. No object can be condemned as incapable of offering any pleasure. Why is this observation made? Because of the extensive permeation of blissful Brahman in every aspect of pleasurable creation. Brihadaranyaka highlights this in chapter 2, section 5, known as the interdependence of the creation. The slokas 1 to 14 in this section describe the honey effect. Om iyam prithvi sarvesham bhutanam madhuhu asyai prithvyai sarvani bhutani madhuhu yascha ayam asyam prithivyam tejo mayo amritamaya purushaha yaschayam adhyatmam charirat tejo mayo amritamaya purushaha ayameva sayo ayam atma idam amritam idam brahma idam sarvam. This well-known earth is the honey or effect. Being like honey of all beings from Hiranyagarbha down to a clump of grass, just as a beehive is made by a great many bees, so is the earth made by all beings. Likewise, all beings are the honey or effect of this earth. Also the shining, that is possessed of the light of intelligence, an immortal being who is in this earth, and the shining immortal as above. Corporeal, being in the body, that is the self as identified with a subtle body, or like honey being helpful to all beings and all beings are like honey to them. This we gather from the particle cha used in the slokam and in the text. Thus, these four are the composite effect of all beings, and all beings are the effect of this composite effect. And all beings are the effect of these four. Yaschayam adhyatmam shariraha tejomaya amritamaya purushaha ayameva sayo ayam atma idam amritam idam brahma idam sarvam. Hence, the universe has originated from the same cause. That one cause from which it has sprung is alone real, and that is called Atman or Brahman. Everything else is an effect, a modification, a mere name, or an effort of merely speech. I will now give only the first line of each of those slokas 2 and 3. And as I mentioned, the first 14 slokas of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which I quoted earlier, describe the creation like this. I'm just giving samples. Ima apaha sarvesham bhutanam madhuhu asam apam sarvani bhutani madhuhu ayam agnihi sarvesham bhutanam madhuhu asyagne sarvani bhutani madhu. As I am quoting this, you are seeing the meaning on the slide being projected. This water is like honey to all beings. All beings are like honey to this water. The fire is the honey to all beings, and all beings are like honey to the fire. Then followed by the same Vayu, the air, the sun, Dishi, the four quarters, the moon, the lightning, the cloud, Akasha, the ether, Dharma, our righteousness, Satyam, the truth, Manusham, our human species, and finally, you have to do the same equation like fire is like honey to all beings like honey to this fire. I am Atma Sarvesham Bhutanam Madhu Asyatmanas Sarvani Bhutani Madhu Yaschayam Asmin Atmani Tejo Mayo Amritamaya Purushaha Yaschayam Atma Tejo Mayo Amritamaya Purusham Ayameva Sayoyam Atma Idam Amritam Idam Brahma Idam Vas Sarvam. That's the 14th sloka in the Brihadaranyaka sequence I gave you. The entire cosmic body is like honey to all the beings that have been created, and all beings are like honey to this cosmic body. The same is true with the shining immortal being who is in this cosmic body and the shining immortal being who is in the individual self itself. These are but the self, and this, namely self-knowledge, is the means of immortality, and this, namely the underlying unity, is known as Brahman. This very knowledge of Brahman is the means of becoming all. Therefore, Tirtha condensed all these 14 slokas into one statement. Nigama sarorga nitya sangatamadum madhuharatmatam eka samuditam krishnam aganita godhanam aparimitanandam anandakaram amareshituhu arpitam. In the second stanza, he packed 4 major Vedanta Vishayam. Ina Shashi Pavaka Taraka Bhasakam Ikshana Samudita Jagadeka Natham Munijana Manasa Sarasa Varahamsam Mahaniya Daivatam Akila Deharatam. Tirtha packed the essence of the Kathopanishad, 5th Valli, Mundakopanishad, namely the second Mundaka, in the very first line, Ina Shashi Pavaka Taraka Bhasakam. Then he used Chandogya, Taittiriya, Brahmanandavalli and Aitiriya for the second line, Ikshana Samudita Jagadekanatham Munijana Manasa Sarasa Varahamsam. And finally, Brihadaranyaka in the 4th line of the same stanza, namely Mahaniya Daivatam Akila Deharatam. For the second expression, Ina Shashi Pavaka Taraka Bhasakam. The meaning says he is the source of the radiance to the sun, the moon, fire and the stars, not the other way about. Second Mundaka of Mundaka Upanishad says, Natatra Suryo Bhati Nachandra Tarakam Nema Vidyuto Bhanti Kutoyam Agnihi Tameva Bhantam Manubhati Sarvam Tasya Vasa Sarvamidam Vibhati. Not there shines the sun, not the moon, not the stars, nor lightnings shine. How then this fire? Meaning is, him and him alone, one shining, everything shines with him. And we use the word Anu. By his shining this, all shines forth. The sun, moon, stars and everything else are nothing but a reflection of the Brahman shining. This verse is the same with Kathopanishad, 2nd Adhyaya, 2nd Valli, 15th verse. When Yamadharma clarifies to Nachiketas on the same question, who is the power behind everything else that I see them around? In the third expression, Ikshana Samudita Jagadeka Natham, the summarized meaning is, he is the sole lord of the world created by him through a mere glance or thought. Where did Sri Narayana Tirtha bring this from? Well, it came from Chandogya Upanishad, 6th Adhyaya, the 2nd section, Sloka 3. Tadaikshata bahusyam prajaye yeti tattejo asrujata tatteja aikshata bahusyam prajaye yeti tadapo asrujata tasmadyatra kvacha shochati swadhateva purushastejasayeva tadadhyapo jayante. Chandogya says that existence decided, namely the one that existed as Brahman decided, I shall be many, I shall be born. Then that Brahman created fire. That fire also decided, I shall be many and I shall be born. Then fire produced water. That is why whenever or wherever a person moans or perspires, that person produces water. The scriptures say that this existence or Brahman is one without a second, always the same, unchanging and unchangeable. So how can it be at the same time many? Vedanta says that it is like a lump of earth, sometimes taking different forms of parts, cups, etc. Or it is like a rope which sometimes looks like a snake. The change is only in names and forms. It's not a real change. Vedanta always says this applies to all that we see in this world. Underlying the seeming diversity, there is unity. This unity, this one, supports the diversity. It is this one that has become many, but only in appearance. To go back to the example of the earth remains the earth, though in appearance it may take the form of a lump or of parts or some other things made out of that lump of clay. An apt description of this is unity in diversity. It's Brahman that has become everything: space, air, fire, water, and earth. That Narana Tirtha's way of packing everything into one simple sentence. Identical sentiments are seen in Taittiriya Upanishad, Brahmananda Valli. So kamayata satapo tapyata idam sarvam masrujata. This is Taittiriya Upanishad. Then Aitariya Upanishad says, Om Atma va idameka yevagra asid na anyat kinchana mishat sa ikshata lokan nusrujayiti. In the beginning, Atman was one and all. This universe was the Atman. There was nothing. Atman thought, I will make worlds out of my own being. Finally, Naranatirtha says in the fourth expression in second stanza, Mahaniya Daivatam Akila Deha Ratam. The fourth expression is indeed extraordinary, highlighted for the first part in Kathopanishad third Valli and later in the seventh Pramanam of the third Adhyaya of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Tirtha says in the statement, Akila Deha Ratam, that Lord Krishna has said that he himself is present in the bodies of all the people in the world as chariots. The Puranas had counted the bodies of Jivatman at one point in time as 84 millions or crores, some huge number, eons ago. The human body is the chariot, the senses are the horses, the soul is the bridle, the intellect is the charioteer, sound, touch, form, desire, smell, representing each one of the Pancha Indriyas are the paths or routes to spiritual evolution. Kathopanishad, third Valli, teaches that body, sense, and soul are Aham, self, and Atman. The adorable one is the charioteer. Atmanam ratinam viddhi shariram tu ratameva. Buddhim tu saratim viddhi manaha cha pragraham eva. Manascha pragraham eva. Know the body for a chariot and the soul for the master of the chariot. No reason for the charioteer and the mind for the reins only. This is Kathopanishad, first chapter, third subchapter, sloka 3, followed by several slokas in that order. Indriyani hayan ahuhu vishayan teshu gocharan. Atmendriya manoyuktam tam atmanam bhokta iti manishanaha ahuhu. Indriyani hayan ahuhu vishayan teshu gocharan. Atmendriya manoyuktam tam atmanam bhokta iti manishanaha ahuhu. Fourth sloka. The senses they speak of as the steeds and the objects of sense as the paths in which they move. And one yoked with the self and the mind and the senses is the enjoyer, say the thinkers. Bhokta iti manishinaha ahuhu. That's what they say. Yastu sada ayuktena manasa avijñātavan bhavati Saradehe Drishtashvaha iva Tasya Indriyani Avashyani Bhavanti. Now he that is without knowledge with his mind ever unapplied, his senses are to him as wild horses and will not obey the driver of the chariot, namely the Atman from inside. Yastu sada yuktena manasa vijnanavan bhavati saradehe sadaswaha iva tasya indriyani vashyani bhavanti. So the next sloka clarifies, but he that has knowledge with his mind ever applied fully and sharp, his senses are to him as noble steeds, thereby they obey the driver. The great horses will only obey an expert driver. Yastu vijnana sarati praghavan naraha saha advanaha param apnoti tad vishnoho param padam. That man who uses the mind for reins and the knowledge for the driver reaches the end of his road, the highest seat of Vishnu. That is what he has been looking for, Paramapadam. Indribeyaha artaha paraha artebhyasya manaparam. Manasaha tu buddhihi buddhehi mahan atma paraha. Then the senses, the objects of sense are higher. And higher than the sensory objects is the mind. And higher than the mind is the faculty of knowledge. And higher than that is the great self. Mahataha avyaktam param. Avyaktat purushaha paraha. Purushat param. Nakichit asti sa kashta sa para gatihi. And higher than the great self is the unmanifest. And higher than the unmanifest is the Purusha. Then the Purusha, there is none higher. He is the culmination. He is the highest goal of the journey. Sarveshu bhuteshu gudaha yeshaha atma na prakashate. Sukshma darshibihi agriya sukshmaya buddhya yeshaha atma adu drishyate. The final sloka in that series, namely the 12th sloka, says, the secret self in all existences does not manifest himself to the vision. Yet he, the big he, is seen by the seers of the subtle by a subtle and perfect understanding. The seventh pramanam of the third canto of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad has a slightly different take. Paramatman is indeed present in such a great chariot. But unlike Jivatman who enclose the body senses, Brahman does not join the senses but remains inside all the Jivatman, activates and operates them. Brihadaranyaka clarifies that Brahman is the Antaryamin which pervades and permeates all the chariots, namely all bodies taken by Jivatman. There is a great sage by name Uddalaka, also known as Uddalaka Aruni, the son of great Aruna, questioned sage Yajnavalkya as permitted by the Brahmanas assembled for discussion, and that is what is narrated by Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in chapter 3, subchapter 7. And Yajnavalkya explains who is that Antaryamin or the inner controller that drives the chariot. Yaha pritivyam tishtati pritivya antaraha. Yam pritivi naveda yasya pritivi shariram. Yap pritivim antaro yamayati. Yaha pritivyam tishtati pritivya antaraha. Yam pritivi naveda yasya pritivi shariram. Yap pritivim antaro yamayati. Yeshata atmantaryami amritaha. He who inhabits the earth is the internal ruler. He who inhabits the earth but is within it, whom the earth does not know, whose body itself is the earth, and who controls the earth from within, is the internal ruler, that is your immortal, your own immortal self. Yopsu tishtan adbyontaraha yamapo na viduhu yasyapaha shariram. Yopo antaro yamayati. Yesha ta atma antaryam amritaha. He who inhabits water but is within it, whom water does not know, whose body is water, and who controls water from within, he is the internal ruler, your own immortal self. So in other words, we started with earth, then we went to water, and then you will see the fire. Yo Agnau Tishtan Agni Antaraha. Yamaha Agni Veda Yasyagni Shariram. Yo Agnir Mantaro Yamayati. We just saw the quotation for earth as well as water. The same thing Brihadaranyaka says in the subsequent slokas 5, 6, and 7 and all that. He who inhabits fire but is within it, whom fire does not know, whose body is fire, and who controls fire from within is the internal ruler. Then goes for the sky, same thing. He who inhabits the air, the same thing. Finally, and who controls the air from within is the internal ruler. Then goes to the heaven, and then the sun, and then the various disi. And then he who inhabits darkness but is within it, he controls the darkness and he is the internal ruler. Finally, yes tejasi, tittam tejaso antaraha, yam tejo na veda, yes tejaha shariram, yes tejo antaro yamayati, yeshata atmantaryamritaha, atma antaryamya amritaha, ityadi daivatam atadi bhudam. This is the 14th sloka. He who inhabits lights, but is within it, whom light does not know, whose body is light and who controls light from within, is the internal ruler, which is nothing but your own immortal self. This much is with reference to the God. Now with reference to the human being, then we will see that in the next benediction. With the last benediction through Geetam 59, Vanabhuvi Govinda Miha Vikarantam, Vallava Yuvati Jana Bhaswantam, full of Vedanta Saram, which we just now saw. Tirtha concludes the Tarangam 6 with the following slokam 153.
Gayantyana Rutuchetam, Gayantam Nandanandanam, Venunada Sudadaram, Udgirantam Mugurmugur, Gayantyana Nuchetam, Gayantam Nandanandanam, Venunada Sudadaram, Udgirantam Mugurmugur.
Gayantyo Nanrutuhus Chetam Gayantam Nandanandanam, Venunada Sudadharam, Udgirantam Muhurmuhu. The gopis were singing and dancing and constantly worshipping the great delight of Nanda, who was also singing and letting his flute mesmerize everybody around him. That's how Narana Tirtha concludes the 6th Tarangam. Some time ago, I had done some brief comparison of Srimad Bhagavata Purana, especially the latest version from Sukha Brahmam, often quoted by scholars and all devotees as simply Bhagavatam, with Melputtur Narayana Bhattadiri's Narayaniyam, often referred to as the abridged Bhagavatam, and also with Sri Krishna Leela Tarangini of Yogi Varya Sri Narayana Tirtha in 12 cantos of Tarangams or waves. Bhagavata Purana, quoted by scholars as the most important Mahapuranams, consists of 12 cantos or skandhas totaling 332 chapters or adhyaya and 18,000 verses. The 10th canto alone has about 4,000 verses and has been the most popular and widely studied since it's all about Krishna. As I mentioned once, about 70% of Bharata Desham today worships Krishna as the primary deity. Especially most of the northern belt, for the devotees there, Krishna is the one and only God. Third canto highlights from the words of Suta Pauranika that Sri Krishna is the source of all incarnations, and Suta touches upon 22 incarnations with Krishna. The cowherd is the 20th avatara. Suta Pauranika pays obeisance to Sukha Brahmam for imparting unto him the knowledge of Vedavyasa's Srimad Bhagavata Purana. Thus, we see the version of today, as we see Bhagavata Purana, as the one that Sukha retold while satisfying the plea of King Parikshit awaiting his moksha. The 40th slokam in that chapter is very significant to understand the greatness of this magnum opus. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Sloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishihi Nishveyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swatchayanam Mahat. This is the third chapter, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Sloka 40. This Srimad Bhagavatam is in itself the literary incarnation of Bhagavan Krishna, compiled by Sri Vedavyasa, the incarnation of Bhagavan. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Fortunately, given the incredibly ancient timing of the masterpiece, the three prominent modern systems of Vedanta, namely Advaita, Vichittadvaita, and Dvaita, do not cloud or distract a pure devotee's keenness to understand Krishna as presented in Bhagavatam. While Vishnu and Narayana and similar cosmic names have been often peppered around, Krishna is the dominant Purusha throughout the Purana. Then comes Melpattu Sri Narayana Bhattadari, born in the southwestern part of India in 1560, giving his abridged version of Srimad Bhagavata Puranam as the masterpiece benediction and Lord of Thiruvaiyaru, with Krishna as its central character and deity while he was just hardly 27 years old. One cannot but observe Bhattadari's strong belief, showing his head all over the Kavyam, that Shiva is mostly pointed as subservient manifestation of Sri Krishna. Bhattadari's Bhagavatam narration consists of 1036 verses or slokams classified in 100 dasakams. Mostly 10 stanzas per dashakam, and the exceptions account for the 36 more slokams. Bhattadari described Rasa Krida or Rasa Leela in very elaborate or vivid detail through 5 dasakams of 50 slokams. Vedavyasa, after his 2 short stints of reincarnation in Kali as Bhakta Jayadeva in 11th century Common Era, focused all his attention on one aspect of Krishna Leela, namely Rasa Leela, and that too with just 3 characters and occasional reference to many other gopis, again not by name. Krishna and Radha being the principal characters, and the go-between was known as Sakhi or friend, often interpreted by Vedantins as the Sadguru between Jivatman and Paramatman or Brahman. Jayadeva's magnum opus is Gita Govinda, consisting of 24 Gitams, often called Ashtapadis, although some of them had less or more than 8 stanzas. Sringara Kavi Kshetraya, who was between 1600 and 1680, a prolific Telugu poet, was credited with 4,000 romantic padams, mostly, if not all, in Telugu, but only about 100 of them seem to have survived, and hardly 50 of them seem to have in publications, especially in Telugu. Here again, Krishna and his favorite gopi, often referred to as Radha, and some of her friends without names, have been portrayed for such Sringara poetry. The only other kavyam spoken in the same breath alongside Narayaniyam and next only to Srimad Bhagavatam for Krishna Leela is the Krishna Leela Tarangini by Yogi Varya Sri Narayana Tirtha, who lived between 1650 and 1745. As we briefly saw in the beginning of this Bhagavata Pravachanam a year ago, Tirtha was a great scholar well versed in Vedas and Vedanta. His command on Sanskrit grammar, usage of about 34 to 39 Karnataka ragams in 10 popular talams, and remarkable prowess in narrations all have become a treasure house for picks by Harikatha Kalaksheva exponents, musicians, dance students, and teachers alike for about 350 years. Tirtha used 302 slokams, 153 gitams, and 31 churnikas, and 2 dozen gadyams as well. His entire work is mostly sequentially focused on the first 58 chapters of the Dasamaskandam or 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. While Sukha Bhagavatam uses chapters 29 through 33 and 35 with about 198 slokams to describe Rasa Krida and the plight of the gopis. Out of 18,000 slokas, Tirtha uses 42 slokams and 24 Gitams between the 7th and 8th Tarangam, totally focused on Rasa Leela. So out of 12 Tarangams, Tirtha used 2 Tarangams exclusively, 42 slokams and 24 Gitams for Rasa Leela. No wonder that the musicians, dancers, and Harikatha exponents are focused on this great work than anything else relating to Krishna Leela. One may wonder why I went through the summary all over again, which I have done probably a year or more before. This is a recap since some of you had asked me to compare these 3 great works, which I often enmesh in my pravachanam. That's why I thought, let me summarize a little bit of Srimad Bhagavatam, then Narayaniyam, and finally Krishna Leela Tarangini of Narayana Tirtha in juxtaposing them in context. We will see in the next session the introduction for Tarangam 7 in the words of Narayana Tirtha, and also a great masterpiece of Gadyam from Tirtha, through which Sri Krishna teaches the gopis the supreme truth. And that is actually like Bhagavad Gita, advanced Gita to gopis. We will conclude this session and Tarangam 6 for the time, and then commence Tarangam 7 in the next session. Thank you. Narayana, 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 Narayana. Hare Krishna, Guru Ayyappa, Narayana, Narayana.